broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome to our Strong Start Community Grant webinar. We are excited to be joined by a group of diverse community stakeholders committing to working together to ensure that children in your communities are engaged in a strong start to kindergarten. We will be starting in just a few minutes. In the meantime, please go ahead and in the question box, we'd like for you to share with us your name, county, and organization so we know who's here with us today. All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to get started. I'm Natalie Brake with Early Learning Indiana, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Kate Falter. Kate is going to be watching over our question box and gathering questions as we go to be answered at the end of the session. So if you have any questions as we go, please go ahead and throw them in there. That's also the place if you're having any difficulties hearing, let us know and we can try to adjust. We'd also like to point out that technology is both a wonderful blessing and also a problem at times. So if we experience any technical difficulties, we'll also be aware of that and you can share that with us in the question box. We are going to be recording this session of our webinar and posting it for reference on the Strong Start Community Grant website in case there's anybody who missed it today. So over the next hour, we have a couple of things that we're going to look at. We're really trying to encourage all of our communities to be committed to building effective kindergarten transitions for all Hoosier children. So today we're going to be looking at Indiana's Preschool Development Grant and what the kindergarten transition efforts have been within our state. Looking at how we're grounded in research and best practices, so what are some of the local and national highlights that we've uncovered throughout this year? And then we'll dive into the Strong Start Community Grant opportunity and give you some considerations for submission to decide if this opportunity is the best match for your community and how you might go about applying. For those of you who don't know us, at Early Learning Indiana, we provide leadership, advocacy, and educational services to improve Indiana's early learning landscape. We are on a mission to ensure the highest level of early care and education for children in Indiana. Our vision is that each child in Indiana is prepared with the essential skills they need to flourish in kindergarten and beyond. Access to high-quality early child care and education provides Hoosier communities with a two-generation impact, giving children a solid foundation and making it possible for parents to advance their own careers. We ensure the improvement of the early learning landscape in Indiana in three ways: by practicing what we teach at our own community-based lab schools, by sharing what we know as an expert partner, enabling other early learning providers to build on their capacity, transform operations, and improve learning outcomes, and then driving system-level change as a leading voice in the conversation about the future of early learning, and its role in helping to solve K-12 and workforce challenges. Early Learning Indiana is very excited to be doing the kindergarten transition work and to be talking with you today. So in 2019, the state of Indiana received a federally funded preschool development grant to evaluate and fortify the birth to 5 system. Recognizing that effective transitions are an important part of kindergarten readiness, Indiana sought to identify leading strategies and practices occurring throughout the state and across the nation that could be readily replicated in Hoosier communities. We took a 4-step approach to looking at kindergarten transitions. Firstly, conducting a review of national best practices, identifying what's already working in other communities and looking at how it could be replicated. Then we looked to uncover promising practices here in Indiana using a prize competition to discover innovative and promising efforts that were happening across our state. After that, we looked at packaging replicable strategies and solutions, so identifying those strategies that could be put into a model and deployed across local Hoosier communities. And now we're very excited to be implementing that replication model statewide and sharing with you what it means to be a strong start community. When we think about kindergarten transitions, the question often comes to mind, why is the transition to kindergarten such a crucial time for Hoosier children? One of the reasons is there are marked differences between the environments experienced by children in pre-kindergarten and those in kindergarten. Pre-kindergarten experiences tend to be nurturing and development-focused environments. Children in this time period may or may not have formal learning. They typically have more time for unstructured interest-based play and typically have more one-to-one attention. When they enter into the kindergarten experience, interactions shift to being focused more on academic progress, including more formal teaching and learning time and less individual choice time. Days also tend to be more structured, and there's a higher student-to-teacher ratio. In order to have an effective transition between the two environments, students need to be prepared and supported. There are many benefits of effective transitions. A smooth transition into kindergarten creates a foundation for children to build upon throughout the rest of their K-12 journey. Without the right supports, the shift from early environments to kindergarten can be a significant challenge. When communities strengthen the connective experience between early learning and the start of kindergarten, they ease the stress of transition, setting children up for effective experiences. Additionally, parents, early learning programs, and K-12 systems benefit from effective transitions, aligning children's experiences and their own expectations to support children. There are benefits for the children themselves, for the parents, for our pre-kindergarten programs, and for our K-12 systems. And those of you who are joining us today from any of those 4 groups have known and have seen those. Effective transitions can also reduce academic fade out, improve academic outcomes, encourage family involvement, and allow children to navigate a significant period of adjustment. We look at some of the national research and we're seeing this across the board. The National Institute of Health is looking at transition activities that are associated with academic gains. We have studies that have been published in the Early Childhood Research Quarterly that are looking at the transition activities of those pre-K teachers that connect about curriculum, and really seeing that those types of connections are leading to high impact. Indiana is only one of many states, and Early Learning Indiana is one of many groups that are considering the benefits created by effective transitions into kindergarten. Because an effective transition into kindergarten is so important for children, we are seeing an impassioned focus across the country by states and local communities to support families and children in beginning their pre-K or their K-12 journey. We're seeing states engaged in instituting policies and creating common resources and providing funding, such as the funding provided by Indiana's Preschool Development Grant. We're seeing innovative local practices where communities of all sizes are coming together to support more effective transitions. No matter how small or large your community is, this can be a community-wide effort. We're seeing K-12 leadership, where our districts are reaching out to form partnerships and offering joint professional development opportunities to drive more effective transition programming. And we're also seeing new technology supports popping up, standardized transition forms and assessment tools. We see states that are issuing student state identifiers in pre-K that can follow students as they go through their K-12 journey. And we're seeing many organizations and states that are leveraging digital apps to engage with families that they're trying to reach. However, there is also a trend emerging that highlights the importance of creating high-intensity practices. In many communities, when kindergarten transition activities are present, they are frequently low-intensity practices, such as sending brochures home, rather than the more effective high-intensity activities, such as arranging for pre-K students to visit a kindergarten classroom, or allowing for joint planning time between pre-K and kindergarten teachers. These studies are showing us that schools that are located in districts serving large number of low-income students were less likely to provide those kindergarten transition activities compared to wealthier schools, meaning that the students and families who might benefit most from these high-intensity activities are least likely to receive them. These are important considerations to keep in mind as you consider the state of your community and what you may be looking to do to become a strong start community. As mentioned, part of the Indiana preschool development approach was to uncover best practices in both Indiana and across the nation. I'm excited to let you know that we will have a full kindergarten transition white paper coming out soon. So please continue to follow Early Learning Indiana on our social platforms, or follow us if you haven't, to be one of the first to read it. We're going to take a look now at a few highlights from our research. As we looked across the nation and at some of the most effective kindergarten transition work happening here in Indiana, we saw 6 common best practices emerge. The first was that readiness is viewed as a community priority, meaning that there is cross-sector, community-wide engagement and responsibility for children being prepared for their first day of kindergarten. Often, the responsibility falls on the backs of parents, K-12 providers, or early learning providers. And where readiness is being most effective, it's viewed as a community priority. The second component we saw was joint accountability between K-12 and ECE providers, where they're able to collaborate and feel shared ownership for facilitating effective transitions. The third best practice was that the people who were closest to the work were engaged. Pre-K and kindergarten teachers are able to communicate, collaborate, and ideate to address issues and uncover opportunities. These are the people who are most connected to the students and their families. Allowing them a seat at the table through the planning and implementation of these actions leads to better results. The fourth best practice that we saw were family engagement approaches that varied. We know that every community is different, and we know that the families that you serve in your communities are different. When we see that programs are ensuring culturally sensitive actions and addressing a range of specific needs, they're more likely to be successful. We also saw that programming that begins a full year before kindergarten and continues into the kindergarten year is most effective. The fifth best practice was that there are specialized supports for at-risk children. These could be transition camps to parent programming, communities that are able to deploy the most intensive supports for the at-risk child populations were able to prepare these students and address skill gaps before they started kindergarten. And the final best practice trend that we saw was that data is being used more and more to drive action and improvement. Whether that be on the statewide level or the local level, communities are increasingly looking to data to understand their current state of affairs, identify opportunities, and then strengthen their practices. We're going to walk through some more information and examples of each of these best practices. The coming slides will have more information listed than I can fully cover during this session, but luckily much of the same information will be included in the coming white paper. Our first highlighted finding was that establishing readiness as a community priority. Some of the amazing community-based practices that we saw were groups that are establishing a cross-functional transition team, meaning they're engaging stakeholders from diverse populations and diverse types of businesses to get them engaged in the work. Also saw that many communities are including families throughout the program design and execution in order to build engagement and ensure cultural appropriateness from the beginning through the completion. Some wonderful examples of this were seen in Boston, West Virginia, and Oregon. Oregon's Early Learning Kindergarten Readiness Partnership and Innovation Grants are very similar in how they allow local ideation and innovation when we look at them compared to our Strong Start Community Grant. When we consider the highlighted findings for building joint accountability between K-12 and ECE, what that means is we're seeing an increase across the nation in partnerships between ECE providers and K-12 providers to discuss transition efforts, and really establishing forums for the administrators to assess the current state and build responsibility. It means that we're seeing responsibilities shared and identified at both the teacher level and the administration level. Some of the interesting highlights with these are going on in California, Illinois, and New Jersey. We're really seeing a focus, you can see in Minnesota's P3 Leadership Series, that's developing elementary school principals into understanding preschool through third grade administrative responsibilities. When we consider what's going on around the nation about engaging the people closest to the work, the teachers, we're continuing to see programs or partnerships that allow for pre-K and kindergarten teachers to be exposed to each other's practices and environments. What that may mean is allowing a pre-K teacher to come shadow in a kindergarten classroom, and then vice versa, so that they can see what the teaching practices are. They can possibly align around curriculum, align around behavior management. And this also creates opportunities for kindergarten teachers to meet with incoming students and their families, and to deepen the readiness and support individual needs for students that are transferring across. There are various states that require communities to offer opportunities for this, and several states have begun aligning standards and practices from pre-K up to third grade. Chicago's pre-K to kindergarten transition project is a great example of a project that was co-designed by teachers. So making sure that teachers were at the table as the project was designed so that their influence and experience can guide the full process. There are some amazing examples around our nation for projects and programs that are driving family engagement, whether it be developing a signature awareness campaign or ensuring family and community representation in the program design. We're seeing people using new technology to reach families and working with community leaders to design customized activations in those hard-to-reach neighborhoods or groups. Some of the highlights from this include Boston's Children's Museum Kindergarten Readiness Exhibit, where families can visit a typical kindergarten classroom exhibit and discuss with their children what it will look like when they go into kindergarten. We're also seeing things like Pittsburgh Public School System's Ready Freddy program, where it's a very identifiable character that's used to talk about what it means to be ready and to go into kindergarten, both with families and the children. Highlighted findings around offering specialized supports for at-risk children are something that are near and dear to both pre-K providers and K-12 providers. We're seeing specialized programming to boost readiness for at-risk groups who may be starting behind in their skills. We're also seeing trends of offering parallel family programming so that it's whole family readiness and whole family supports. You'll see a few of these highlighted here, such as the 6-week academic program in Georgia, or the offerings in Oregon, where they have early kindergarten transition programs in their Title I schools. We're very excited to highlight some of the findings around using data to drive action and improvement. We know that the more informed we can be and the better we can use data, the better decisions that we can make to inform both our plans and our execution. So we're seeing states and cities that are establishing common transition forums and creating information sharing methodologies. It's very easy to say we can share information between our pre-K providers and our K-12 providers, but if there's not methodology to support that, it's something that can quickly fall behind. We're also seeing better dialogue between these groups to evaluate and plan the readiness efforts. A couple of examples are these, as West Virginia, where the code requires counties to have a system for transferring assessment data between pre-K and kindergarten systems, or in New Jersey, where they require school boards to establish methods for the sharing of this information, especially when it comes to students who have IEPs or other readiness concerns. When we consider the best practices happening around the country, it's important to note that we have programs who are creating the same patterns for successful transitions here in Indiana. Through our Strong Start for Kindergarten Prize, Early Learning Indiana sought to uncover promising practices happening in Indiana schools, early learning programs, and community organizations. We encouraged applicants to share innovative ideas that help children move effectively from the early years into kindergarten classrooms. We received 55 submissions from 23 school districts, 23 early learning providers, and 9 nonprofit community organizations that represented 24 Indiana counties. In total, we awarded $100,000 in prize funds to 9 recipients. We were impressed but not surprised that these recipients were intentionally striving towards excellence in at least one, if not more, of the 6 best practices we uncovered. These are local programs that are engaging their community partners to create comprehensive community approaches, creating opportunities for partnership and learning between pre-K and kindergarten teachers, identifying at-risk groups in their community and finding creative approaches to engage both the students and the families, and using their own local data to drive the decision-making process. I could spend a much longer time than allowed for our session today sharing all of the elements of these amazing programs. In the interest of getting further into the details about the Strong Start Community Grant, I'll only share a few highlights. The School City of Hobart Building Brickies brings together local early childhood providers in a cohort model, Ready, Set, Go, that involves monthly meetings, trainings, collaborative events, and data sharing to help families find high-quality care in preschools, early intervention services, and create smooth transition for kids into kindergarten. They truly have embraced and are championing a community-wide approach to transitions into kindergarten. The United Way of Allen County has a data pilot for data sharing through 3rd grade that they are seeking to scale even larger in their community. And the United Way of Porter County is conducting a community-wide assessment project with standard assessments across different providers. Perry Township School District Preschool is using technology to translate and reach diverse families in their communities to ensure that families feel welcome in their communities and understand what the school is trying to communicate with them about. And Indiana University Campus Children's Center is creating opportunities for mentor families from the same school district to support both students and families. These are just a few ways that Indiana communities are stepping up to support effective transitions into kindergarten. With our Strong Start Community Grant, we are excited to help even more communities tackle this crucial issue. If there's anybody who's on our webinar from any of these recipients, we'd like to again say congratulations and thank you for sharing your promising practices with us and with the state. So let's dive in a little bit more into the Strong Start Community Grant opportunity. Remember that many details for this opportunity are on the grant website and submission platform. You can also continue to ask questions in our question box that will be answered in a few moments, as well as email me afterwards if you think of any other questions. There's a few important components to consider when you look at this grant opportunity. The first is who is eligible to submit. Community planning teams that include cross-sector leaders from local government, K-12 districts, early learning providers, nonprofits, and other community organizations are required to apply collaboratively. Only one submission will be accepted per community, and it is up to the community planning team to determine the lead organization. Grants must be made to a lead organization consisting of one of the following types: a K-12 district or board, United Way, or community foundation. And the letters of intent must be signed by an executive champion from the lead organization. Our submissions will be managed using an online form that is hosted on the Strong Start community page. So in the process, at the top of that page where you may have clicked to register for this webinar, there's also where you can click to submit your letter of intent. And when we consider what the winners will receive, Early Learning Indiana will award 15 communities with up to a $25,000 grant to do 3 things: commit to the Strong Start community framework and criteria, develop a local plan to meet the Strong Start community criteria, and execute their local plan. We want to be very clear on what this opportunity both is and isn't. We are not looking for comprehensive plans in your letter of intent. What we are looking for is a group of diverse community stakeholders who are committed to the Strong Start community framework and criteria and are ready to develop and execute a plan to meet that criteria. To better understand if this opportunity is right for your community, let's take a look at the criteria themselves. Inspired by the best practice trends identified in state and national research, the Strong Start community criteria and measures are as such. There are 5 criteria and several measures throughout. The first criteria is around community participation and includes the individual measures of key stakeholder representation within the transition team, including at minimum, early learning providers, K-12 district leadership, kindergarten teachers, community organizations and/or elected leaders, and families. The second measure is that there must be formalized public and private partnerships forged in support of the plan. The criteria of shared ownership has a measure of joint participation by ECE and K-12 stakeholders in the planning process with presence of jointly and separately owned deliverables explicitly stated in the plan. You'll note here that we are not telling you what your plan will be. The idea is that these are measures you will aspire to within your plan. In the criteria of teacher engagement, there are two measures. The first being that at least one opportunity is present for pre-K and kindergarten teachers to shadow each other's learning environments. And the second being that at least one joint professional development offering for pre-K and kindergarten teachers to learn, discuss, and plan must be offered. In the criteria of child and family readiness supports, there are three measures. The first being that at least 75% of incoming children and families are engaged in meaningful activities. Those activities may differ from community to community and may differ within the community, but the idea is that you would be touching in some way at least 75% of the kindergartners and their families that are going to be coming to your K-12 system. The second measure is identification of at least one at-risk population and targeting of at least one high-impact engagement activity towards that population. And the third one is that there must be involvement of the families in planning and execution of these efforts. The final criteria is data utilization, and there are two measures. Firstly, that you must conduct a cross-functional discussion with stakeholders around readiness data at least once per year in your community. And secondly, that there must be at least one best practice data-driven strategy incorporated into the local plan. Again, this is not something that we will decide for you, but that through your process of local planning, you will decide what that data-driven strategy you will be incorporating. These criteria are the foundation of your local Strong Start community plan. Funded teams will use these criteria as the guidelines and the goals to create and implement their plan. A Strong Start community is one that meets all of these measures. If these are the criteria you are seeking for, let's look now and walk through the components that need to be addressed specifically in your letter of intent that is due this Friday by 5 p.m. In addition to stating the lead organization's name and mission, there are 5 components we want for you to explain within your letter of intent. They are the current state need of your community, potential community impact by addressing transitions into kindergarten, a description of how efforts will build on other community plans and initiatives already in place or planned, a description of how you plan to leverage current and new partners in your planning efforts, and then what your perceived community strengths and gaps are, especially as they are related to the grant planning criteria. Remember that you also must submit 2 letters of support from other members of the community planning team to demonstrate cross-sector participation and partnership between public and private entities. These letters can be from an elected official, early learning provider, representative, either school or community-based, local early learning coalition leaders, chamber or local development group leaders, community or business partners, or families. Once funding decisions are made, this is the timeline for those who are completing this grant. In December of 2019, we'll be notifying those who are recipients. In January of 2020, communities will then receive the funds to build and execute their local plans. Between January and August of 2020, the communities will develop their plans to meet the criteria of the Strong Start community. And in August of 2020 through July of 2021, those plans can be put into action for entering kindergartners. Now that we've looked at the importance of kindergarten transitions, the reason that Indiana is approaching this as a critical moment for our students, the best practices occurring both in Indiana and beyond, as well as the specific criteria for the Strong Start Community Grant, I'd like to open it up for your questions. Kate is going to help me field the questions, so I'm going to turn it over to Kate to ask. Good afternoon, Kate.
Good afternoon, Natalie. Happy to be on this webinar today. So far, we have one question in the question box here, and that is, do we need to specifically name the members of the community planning team in the letter, or are applicants able to propose who will be asked?
That is a great question. Anybody that you name in your letter of intent, we would like for you to note that they are a member of the current planning team. What you could note is where we look at you saying, what are some of your current strengths and opportunities and gaps? You could name those who are currently part of the planning team in the top section where you list their name, organization, title. And then in your opportunities or your gaps, you could note that there are several other community stakeholders that you know are not at the table. And part of your planning process would be to engage and include them.
So while we are waiting to see if other questions are added to the question box, we had some questions from our earlier webinar today that may be helpful and provide useful information. One of those questions, for sustainability, what funding sources are available or suggested beyond the startup?
That's an excellent question. The idea is that the Strong Start Community Grant will fund both your planning and at least the starting point of your implementation of your plan. However, depending on your community, fully implementing your plan could take additional funding. Right now, we do not have anything specific planned for future funding on this topic. However, Early Learning Indiana, as a supporter and a champion of high quality early learning in our state and beyond, is always looking for future opportunities. So I would say if you're looking towards future funding opportunities with us, be mindful of following us on our social pages, keep an eye on our website. We tend to make sure that when we have a funding opportunity, we broadcast it fairly widely and specifically to those who would be most interested in it. But also be aware that part of your plan needs to be engaging your local community to support. When we talk about engagement from your local decision makers and your local businesses, the reason we need these groups on the planning team is, one, ultimately, strong starts for kindergarten impact them, and two, they have a responsibility for supporting that in a very local way.
We have another question in the question box. Knowing that there is an expectation for continuing support for the children and families in the kindergarten year, what and how are communities doing to provide support?
That's an excellent question. So some of the things that we've seen when we look at that family engagement, when we see programs that are engaging peer-to-peer mentoring. So it can be something where you have current kindergarten families that are matched with incoming kindergarten families, and they stay matched throughout the kindergarten year. So the families have a parent that they can call and they can ask questions to. You'll see some programs that really intentionally touch base with their families as they begin the kindergarten year and engage them fully in the school community. So it really depends on how the K-12 district approaches it. But there are many opportunities to really customize what that approach looks like depending on the families you serve.
The next question is, are there any restrictions on fund usage?
We do want to make sure that these funds are used towards the creation of that plan and the execution of the plan. It's very difficult for us to place restrictions on that because we expect communities to have very different plans. The idea is that the criteria are a standard that you are shooting for in order to ensure that you are having effective transitions for the students and families in your communities. I will say that as groups make their plans, we may offer some feedback on some areas, and we would expect that your funding does go directly towards creation and implementation of those plans. So if you have an idea for something that does not lead to meeting those criteria, that would be ineligible for funding.
Another question from our webinar this morning, can a community be a smaller part of the county?
That is a wonderful question, and we intentionally did not define a community as a specific geographic area because we know in some communities the entire county is considered the community. For others, it may be a smaller portion of the county, or we've even had some groups that are trying to do a multiple county approach because of where the counties are located and how the families interact within that area. What we would like to see is that you define your area of community in a way that makes sense for you and your community, and then also makes sense with the stakeholders that you have engaged to be part of your planning team.
Another question from earlier today, can you review the process for completing the online form? For example, does it have a function to go in today and begin, review the format, save your progress, and then return? Or is the process for form completion and letter uploads a one-time access and submit on Friday?
Process questions are always wonderful because it's great to make sure you know what you're doing. And the answer to that is you absolutely can start it now. Through our grant platform, you are able to start the application, save it, and then submit later. So that application, there's a link to it on our Strong Start Community Grant website. And then once you go to it, you'll have to create a profile if you have not previously with us. And then you'll begin the application for this grant itself. There are a few demographic questions around your lead organization. Then there's a place to upload your letter of intent, as well as a place to upload your 2 letters of support. So if you wanted to, you could go in right now, fill out your demographic information, save it, and then wait to upload those letters until you're ready and then submit. A question that was asked previously as well is if you get very excited, as I sometimes do when I'm completing these applications, and you accidentally submit when you didn't mean to, there is no need to worry. You can email me, and I will go ahead and switch over so that my email address is up on the screen in the middle right there. And I will unlock your application. You can finish it and resubmit, and that's perfectly acceptable.
We had some question earlier today about could a list of participants on the 2 webinars be shared from someone who's in a larger community and wanted to be sure to connect with any other ECE providers that might be looking to be involved within this short application period.
Mm-hmm. And we did get an answer to that question. We are not able to share a full registration list, but I would advise if you're concerned that there may be others who are asking in your area, you can absolutely reach out to me, and I would be willing to share your information with anybody else that was on the webinar and noted they were from the same county. And that way, with your permission, I'm sharing it with them, and then they could look to contact you.
A question we just got in the question box. I do not see any budget submission requirements as part of the application process. Can you please confirm that we do not need to submit a budget?
I can confirm that you do not need to submit a budget. I would actually caution, please don't submit a budget. We don't want you to know what you're doing yet. What we want to know is that you have the right stakeholders at the table, that you understand what the criteria are, and that you're committed to reaching them, where some of your strengths and gaps are with reaching that criteria. And then the idea is that you use this funding to dig more into that data and to make a plan that's going to be viable. If you already think you know what you're doing, you're missing out on an opportunity to really experience the process of creating a Strong Start community plan.
A question that we received through an email asked, per the requirements for the Strong State Grant, it states that the letter of intent must be signed by an executive champion from the lead organization. This is someone who's a preschool director for a school corporation, and would they count, or would it need to be signed by the superintendent? And then a secondary question, does the executive champion from the lead organization and the primary contact person need to be the same person?
Okay. Those are both very important clarification questions. For the first one, when it says that there must be an executive signature, that would be the superintendent, assistant superintendent, somebody who is basically coming from that office. And the reason is we really want to make sure that we have buy-in at all levels of the organization. For the second question, can I see the second question? I'm sorry. Too much in my head.
I think it was, does the lead executive person need to be the same as the primary person on the team?
The primary point of contact can be whoever makes the most sense for your organization. Sometimes that is an executive champion. Sometimes it's somebody in the advancement department. Sometimes it's somebody who just gets to wear that hat regardless of what their title is. So you can choose, the person who submits does not have to be the single point of contact either. So as long as we do have a single point of contact and you understand that we will be reaching out to them with notifications, then whoever you choose as your organization to put up is fine with us.
Another question we received earlier today, is the purpose of the grant to provide pre-K sessions before students' kindergarten year for students with no pre-K experience?
That could certainly be one of the tactics that could be identified within your plan. When we think of at-risk populations, students who have no early learning experience may be one of those at-risk populations in your community. If you've already noted that it is and you're working on it, that could be one of the strengths that you share. If you're not sure if it is, that could be one of the gaps that you're looking to identify, and it could be a tactic that you strive to use as you look at implementing your plan.
Will this grant cover salaries or stipends? Is another question we got.
Mm-hmm. And we did get that one finalized and answered. It would be allowable within the budget as long as the people who their grants or stipends, the salaries or stipends were covering were ones that were directly responsible for creation and implementation of the plan. All funding from this grant needs to go towards those two steps.
Okay. Checking the chat box, or question box rather, here to see if we have any other questions. Please go ahead and add any additional questions that you would have at this time.
While you guys are looking at that, I know one of the other questions that was asked this morning was around who is able to be that lead organization, and just want to remind again that it must be a K-12 organization or K-12 district, a community foundation, or a United Way. If you are a community member, if you are an early learning provider, if you are somebody, an elected official, we definitely encourage you to be on that team, but we would be looking for the lead organization to solely be one of those 3 types.
Another clarifying question that we got during the webinar this morning was, to clarify, this grant is for programming for children 4 to 5 years old who will be the next class of kindergartners, as opposed to 2 to 3-year-olds who will eventually be kindergartners.
And that is a great clarification to make. We at Early Learning Indiana understand that high quality early learning in the 0 to 4 years is crucial to development of healthy, happy children. But when we look specifically at this opportunity, we're talking about planning and implementing for a Strong Start community and the Strong Start community criteria. We're really looking at that year before kindergarten, the transition directly into kindergarten, and those activities leading into the transition, and then the activities that follow up and support that transition. So we would be looking for your plan to be a Strong Start community to be focused on solely those activities.
We also received a clarification question earlier about, can you address what's supposed to be in the letter of intent specifically?
Yes, so when we're looking at the letter of intent, and you can also view this on the website that has the information for it, we're really looking for the name and mission statement of the lead organization, those names, titles, and organization for all members of the community planning team, and then answering those 5 questions: the synopsis of your community need, the potential impact of striving towards the criteria, the description of how this effort will build on other community efforts, the description of how you expect to leverage partners in the community to build a robust plan, and the current status of those partner relationships, and then any perceived community strengths and gaps related to that criteria. And a reminder that our submissions should be no more than 2 to 3 pages.
I don't see any additional questions in the question box at this time. If there are any others questions, please add those now. One question that we got several times during the webinar this morning was if these slides would be available after the webinar in addition to the recording.
Yes, we are looking to have both available, so we will have a downloadable PDF of the slides for the webinar, which obviously then will have the slides only without any of the audio, as well as a link to be able to view the webinar and hear the audio in addition to having the information on the slides.
We're not seeing any additional questions in the question box. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Natalie, so you can provide any final information.
All right. Well, I would just like to say that I have been very excited by all of the participants that we've had in both webinars today. We're seeing a really diverse group of stakeholders from across our state who are very interested and concerned about the start to kindergarten that our youngest users are having as they go through their journeys, and want to ensure that they have effective transitions so they are ready for success day one and ready to continue that success. Been happy to note that we do have stakeholders across all the different areas that we're looking to be engaged in these community planning teams. We know that there is a tight turnaround on this grant opportunity, and we understand that you should not have everything ready for your plan. We don't need your plan yet. We need you to have a committed team ready to create and execute this plan to ensure that your local community can become a Strong Start community. I will also note that if anybody gets off the webinar and then has a pressing question that they realize 5 minutes from now that they absolutely forgot to ask, my email is still up there at the bottom. It's natalieb@earlylearningindiana.org, and I'd be happy to answer any further questions that you may have. All right, then with that, we are going to go ahead and wrap up the webinar. Thank you everybody for attending, and I hope that you guys are able to coordinate with your communities, discuss the Strong Start Community Grant opportunity, and decide if it's the right fit for you. We look forward to engaging with the recipients of this grant in the coming year to see what amazing things they're going to be doing and how they're going to be strengthening the community supports for effective transitions into kindergarten for their students and families. Thank you. You guys have a great day.